Okay, welcome back. Part three of week three, essential reporting. It's the final part of this week's online lecture. So you've heard me mention quotes the last couple of weeks, how vital they are to stories. They bring articles to life and they introduce people and they bring colour to your stories. And people are what we write about in the main. If we're not writing about people, the stories that we do write affect people greatly. So everything you write will affect somebody. So a bit about quotes. They're absolutely vital to news stories. When you spotted a story, you should always be thinking, who can I interview? Who can I get a quote for? What type of person would be great to speak to for a comment about this story, about this information? Sometimes it can be, the subject of the story. That's most times it can be. But also, if you're writing a story about, say, climate change, you might think, right, okay, well, I might see if I can get an expert, a professor from university or something like that. So always try and think about who you're going to get your quotes from, because, as you say there, you do bring articles to life. You break up the flow of the copy in a positive way. It can also provide inspiration for intros as well. If somebody says something really interesting or controversial, then you can craft an intro around that as well. And to that end, it can often be the actual story. So you can go to a press conference, get some quotes, a politician may reveal something huge or anything, or you might be speaking to somebody in the street who might say something interesting. It can actually be the story. And they add other voices and views, usually reveal the source of the story. So you must attribute your quotes as well, unless you're using a confidential source. But so it's important to make it clear to your reader who's talking. So whenever you put a direct quote into a story, make sure your reader knows who's talking. So it'd be Dave Lafferty said, blah, blah, blah. The next couple of paragraphs might be somebody else speaking, so it'd be Fred Bloggs said. So make sure it's always clear who's saying, who's talking, who's saying that quote. So there's two types of speech. Direct speech, which is where you're directly quoting somebody. So David Lafferty said it's sunny outside today, and you always use double speech marks. The other type of speech is indirect or reported speech. So that'd be Dave Lafferty said it was very sunny outside on Sunday. Direct speech was David Lafferty said I think it's going to be really sunny later today. So they're the two differences. So take a bit of a look at those, difference between direct and indirect or reported speech, and both are key to your stories. It's important to use both those elements. So, okay, here we go. A few more examples where the speech marks go. And I want you to pay attention to the format here as well, because you need to use the correct format when using quotes. So in this example, we've got Mr. Hookham said, colon. So note the colon. Don't use a comma, always use a colon. So Mr. Hookham said, colon, then you put in a space, and then it's the double quote mark. So Mr. Hookham said, colon, space, double quote mark, I never threw a punch, I never assaulted him, full stop, close quotes with a double speech mark. Now, the common error here is people put the full stop outside the double speech mark, so make sure that goes inside when the quote's a whole sentence. So just take a look. Take a bit of time just to have a look at that line there about Mr. Hookham. So just to go over it again, Mr. Hookham said, then you put a colon, then a space, then it's a double speech mark, then it's the quote, finish with a full stop, and then you close it off with another double speech mark. Okay. Different, obviously, with indirect or reported speech. In this instance, Mr. Hookham insisted that he did not hit him. So you're basically paraphrasing what Mr. Hookham said there. With a partial quote, you'd use Mr. Hookham said that he never assaulted him. And in this case, the full stop goes outside the double quote mark. But at this stage, I don't want you to worry too much about partial quotes. I want you to use, full quotes, so full sentence. So we'll cover partial quotes in a bit more detail as the weeks go on. But please, for now, just take a real good look at direct speech and indirect reported speech, because again, it's another thing that if you crack this early on, you won't look back. But people do still have a few issues as the weeks go on. So just take a look at the correct format for quotes. And again, we'll go over this in the workshop. Okay. Okay, further examples of how to use quotes. So sometimes, you'd use a quote. Dave Lafferty said, I think it's going to rain this afternoon, full stop. Then I might want to say something else. You might want to quote me something else. So you wouldn't close off the quote there. You start a new sentence and then carry on the quote. So let's just have a look at these examples there. So he insisted, space, open, quote with a double speech mark. I didn't push him. He fell back into that room onto an MEP, stood just inside the door, full stop. Now, because you're going to carry on quoting this chap here, you don't close off with a double quotes mark. Instead, you start a new paragraph. You start that new paragraph with a double speech mark. Some of the MEPs helped him up. He stood straight up. There was no indication of him hitting his head on metal windows or anything else. He fell back onto an MEP. And as you're going to close the quote off now, full stop, finish with double speech mark. So again, take a bit of time just to look at that as well. So basically, when you're carrying on quoting somebody, don't close off the quote. Just start a new paragraph and then start with another double speech mark. So have a look at that example, and then also have a look in online as well. The usual sites, BBC, Liverpool Echo, MEN, and you'll see examples of that as well. So I appreciate it's quite tricky. It's a lot of information being thrown at you at the moment, but it's definitely worth taking a bit of time, to look at quotes as well. And like I say, we'll be having another detailed look in the workshop. Okay, there's a few more examples there, which you could press pause and have a look at. I'm not going to go into it now, but do take time to read that slide. Plenty of good examples there of what we've just been talking about. Okay. Addressing people in stories, another thing that we need to get right. So, first mention of a person in a story would usually be, say, Dave Lafferty, and then subsequently you'd call me Mr. Lafferty. For women, Mrs. if married or widowed, Miss if unmarried, and Ms. if unmarried or the marital status unknown. And some married women also prefer Ms. So worth checking, if possible, how people wish to be referred to. So again, take a bit of time to look at that. But the basic premise is you'd call somebody, Fred Smith first off, and then subsequent mentions would be Mr. Smith. So don't call them Fred Smith again. Professions and titles, these can get a bit tricky, but you would include them quite often if counsellor. So each news organisation has a different style for things like counsellor as well. Here we use counts, we shorten counsellor to count after the first mention. So you'd say Councillor Jean Murphy first off, and then subsequent mentions you'd say COUNC Murphy. Same with doctors, Dr. Jane Hargreaves, and it's just Dr. Hargreaves after that. So another slide for you to take a bit of a look at there. So it's fairly straightforward. Names first off. So Dave Lafferty first off, subsequent mentions, Mr. Lafferty. Okay, just another quote from the Essential Reporting Guide. Although the world of journalism is changing fast, as technology blurs the boundaries between newspapers, radio, television, and web-based media, the reporter's core role remains the same: to recognise news, communicate with people, gather information, and create accurate, balanced, and readable stories. So it doesn't matter what platform you're writing for now, news writing skills stayed the same and will stay the same for some time to come. So take some time to just have a think about that and think about what we've learned today in this online lecture. So we've covered quite a lot, but I've broken it down into 3 parts, so you can go back over these videos and just go over punctuation, the grammar, the style issues we've spoken about, and really do try to get to grips with these. So before the workshop, look at some intros, look for some examples of things we've talked about. Look how articles are structured, how long they are, what angle you've taken. And I'd also like you to do something as well ahead of the workshop. Choose one intro you particularly like, write down 3 reasons why. For example, if it's well written, straight to the point, it's bold, it perfectly sums up the story. So just follows on from some of the things that have been mentioned the last couple of weeks, that when you're reading intros online, and I hope you are reading lots because that's the way you're going to improve, approach it with an analytical mindset and just have a think about how intros and stories are written. So, okay, well done for bearing with me this long. There's a lot of sort of nitty gritty things and basic brick building elements of news writing that we've gone through today. So it's worth, like I say, spending quite a bit of time